Good afternoon, welcome all. We are here for a treat, the last session of the day, a true powerhouse, Vanessa García Polanco. You will agree with me once you hear me making the initial remarks and listen to her presentation on her experience and vision on her subjects of interest. Vanessa is an experienced leader, a scholar, speaker, writer, and organizer working on food, agriculture, and sustainability stakeholders. She co-designs the strategy and implementation of the National Young Farmers Coalition policy campaigns. She serves as the organizational council member of the U.S. National Sustainability Agricultural Coalition. She is a United Nations Youth Agricultural Working Group member, and as part of the 2021, participated in the New York Times Generation Climate at the United Nations Conference of the Paris Climate Hub. As an Afro-Dominican immigrant, she brings her expertise and identities to her policy and advocacy activities. In her free time, and she does have some, she leads Dominican food studies research projects and funnels financial and physical resources to Dominican food sovereign projects. With this, I just want to welcome Vanessa. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Josefina, and thank you to the Naturally Latinos Conference and the Nature Forward community for inviting me to be one of your keynote speakers. For me, it's an honor to share the stage with Dr. Hernandez that I presented yesterday. And just thank you again for the invitation to share my journey with you all, and hopefully you can find common experiences as Latino immigrants in your journeys, and also find some tools. So what comes next as you find out how you belong, how you pertenecer to this environmental movement that we all are part of. My first slide, please. So as I said, I really want to focus my presentation on telling you about my journey on how I become an agriculture and food justice advocate, and also sharing a lot of the tools that have helped me in my journey. But most importantly, I just want to give you the roadmap, so hopefully you can also it may help you design your own roadmap. Next step. So I really want us to ground ourselves. We all come from many different places, have gone through many different experiences, and many share experiences. But I'm really asking you, who are you today in food and agriculture? So I want to invite you to write down, maybe in the chat or somewhere else, somewhere that you can go back to, and please write down all the identities that you claim, all the identities and spaces that you belong in many different ways, and they may look in many different forms and shapes. So whatever labels call you related to food, agriculture, and the environment, and natural resource management, I invite you to write them down. And also other labels that are part of your identity, like sister, daughter, mother, son, father, and so on. So I'm gonna give you 30 seconds to 1 minute to do that. Thank you for sharing, and maybe as you see other participants' responses, you also remember some other identities that you have that you maybe forgot to write down. So next slide. So I want to share with you some of my identities that are more important to me, and some that I honestly keep forgetting to write down. Like, for me, it's really important to say that not only I'm an immigrant, but I'm also a new America, because I really care about participating in democratic processes as an American in the United States. A lot of my identities here are really localized. First, I start with Mocana. That's the name of my town in the Dominican Republic, and that only makes sense to another Dominican. And then my regional identity inside the Dominican Republic is called Cibaeña, which is like saying I'm from the Midwest. And then other identities that may resonate with you, like Dominican, Caribbean, a person that has a bachelor and master's of science degrees. I consider myself a researcher because I'm curious and excited about food and agriculture research. An immigrant, as I told you. The place I call home when I moved from the Dominican Republic is Rhode Island. So I consider myself a die-true Rhode Islander. I can tell you so many things about Rhode Island. And many other things are here. And I especially want to point out that I really love botany and I study to be a herbalist. As many of you are nature lovers and naturalists by training, we can find a lot of common identities. But at the same time, I really want us to remember that we may not show up in all the places at the same time. We all are identities in our sleeps. In many places, as we do this work, we not always may show up as our authentic selves. And that has taken me a long time to be able to show up as my full authentic self. And in a place in comfort with all the identities that I hold dear to myself. So, as I tell you about my story, I want you to remember all the identities that you are claiming and have yet not claimed. And I really want to focus, especially for me, I did not claim my Afro Latinidad until I went to college. And I just want more language and resources to help me understand my own racial positionality. And many other things I was afraid of claiming, like being a person that likes botany and herbalism when I'm supposed to be a policy nerd here in Washington, D.C. So those are identities I'm working in reclaiming. But I want to tell you a little bit more about who I am. You're learning about who I am today. I want to tell you who I was before. Next slide. So this picture is a picture of my dad's farm in the Dominican Republic in a place called La Penda, Guanajuato, Cayetano Hermosen in Dominican Republic. So my study is that most of my family comes from an agricultural background in the Dominican Republic. And I want you, whatever you're thinking a farm looks like in the Dominican Republic, I want you to stop thinking about that because I come from a middle income agricultural town in the Dominican Republic where mostly agribusinesses and really dependency in agrochemicals happens. These are not cute little subsistence farms. That's not my background. We come from really big, large agricultural operations. And so it's really important for me to tell you that all agriculture in our countries back home is cute and quaint, but also we have a lot of environmental damage and a lot of struggles in a journey towards sustainable agriculture in our home countries like the Dominican Republic. So, but what I grew up seeing a lot of landscapes related to food and agriculture, to beautiful greenery, but at the same time, really weak regulations and support for the farming and agricultural industry. And I saw that to my own family's journey when we had to, on my mom's side, we had to give up our land access and give it to other landlords to manage. And my own dad's journey being a struggling farmer for most of his life. Even when he is really grounded on the land, he has to struggle and change products and production systems over the past 25 years through a long journey. At the same time, for me, it's really important to tell you the countryside, the campo I come from, because when I declared to my family after recently migrating to the United States that I wanted to study agricultural economics, everyone told me, we took you out of the countryside, but we didn't take the countryside out of you. Te sacamos del campo, pero no sacamos el campo de ti. And for me, I think that was a beautiful reclamation that even when I migrated to the United States and I was told that I had to pursue other careers here, I chose a career that was not available to me in the Dominican Republic, focusing on agricultural economics with a focus on sustainable agriculture and sustainability, especially environmental sustainability. That was now a principle that was applied in the Dominican Republic studies. But at the same time, it led to a lot of hard conversations with my family. They were flat out disappointed on me for studying this. We made all the sacrifices. We're working this hard for you to go to college and you yourself. So it was really important for me to take them with me in this journey of being excited about agriculture in the United States and reclaiming and staying connected to our identity as a Latina immigrant through agriculture. Next slide. And when I first migrated to the United States, I was mostly focused on food. I was really curious and really fascinated that even when everything changed in my family, food was still essential to us. Our food waste didn't change. We still ate a lot of traditional Dominican foods. We still had to eat at the standard Dominican time, like 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. And for us, food was still centered to our identity, and especially how we procure food and how our relationship to food, even how food was acquired and prepared. Everything changed around me, but a lot of the what we usually call the food behaviors and the food culture stay the same. And in this picture, you have my favorite Dominican dish. It is mango with tres golpes. And mango is mashed green plantains with salt and butter and onions, and usually served with eggs, salami, and fried cheese. So for me, it was really important to stay connected to my food ways. At the same time, when I was already showing an inclination towards agriculture journey. Next slide. But that journey needed to stay rooted with my family's connection and identity. So this is a picture of my dad's current crop. He has limes right now, which I usually say lemons because English is funny. Limes and lemons, limas y limones. So, and for me, it was really important, again, that I took my family on this journey. So, as I was learning and taking agricultural classes, I will be calling my dad to ask him about this. And my dad didn't migrate to the United States with us. He stayed back in the Dominican Republic to work in the farm. As I was taking pit management production classes, I would call my uncle, who used to work in a large pit agribusiness back in the Dominican Republic. Or when I had to do field visits, I will take my family with me to random farms in the in Rhode Island. And that allows us to connect and learn about different crops and learn about different things that were different in our food landscape, but at the same time, our food culture was the same. And at the same time, I had to become a connector between the local food system of Rhode Island and the desired food system my family wanted and wanted to access. I will always remember when my family, I don't know if this is a Dominican thing, haven't been able to dig it out exactly, or just my hometown thing. We really like green tomatoes, even when we know green tomatoes are usually associated with African American communities. So I remember every summer we'll be disappointed that we couldn't find green tomatoes. And then I started working in a farmer's market and I was able to find green tomatoes because I was working in a mostly African American community and I was able to find green tomatoes there. And I would just buy them and take them home. And we were able to have our culturally appropriate sandwiches because for us, you need green tomatoes for your sandwiches, no red ones. And it was little things like this that allowed my family and me as the conductor to the new American food system to also help preserve our food culture. And at the same time, getting excited about new foods, food ways, and the food landscape that we have access in Rhode Island. Until this day, my family still calls me to ask me where the farmers market is in Rhode Island, even when I live in Washington, D.C., which is fine because I still serve in a lot of boards and exciting positions in Rhode Island supporting farmers there. Next. And I had a lot of great experiences at the University of Rhode Island, as I told you. I got the opportunity to visit Mexico to learn about agri-food systems there. I got to manage the farmers market in my town as a really young person because I volunteered for it. And at the same time, I realized that there were not a lot of people that look like me in agriculture. A lot of Dominicans stayed in Providence, and I was in Kingston, the really rural agricultural town where the university was, the land grant university was. And this is a picture with Tio and Margarita here in the corner, who were the first Dominican farmers that I met in Rhode Island. And to this day, we're still not sure how many other Dominican farmers are there because they're severely undercounted, even when Dominicans are the largest Latino community in Rhode Island. So as I started seeing all these trends, I realized that I needed to understand better more trends about immigrants in food and agriculture, and especially about me and how to navigate these spaces. Next slide. And that led me to take a lot of different positions and a lot of different roles across the food system across Rhode Island. My favorite one was working as a farmers market manager support. I got to support 5 farmers market in all Latino neighborhoods across Rhode Island. If you are from Rhode Island, please come forward in the chat. We have a vibrant and exciting food scene, agricultural scene in Rhode Island. So I got the opportunity just to visit farms, support farmers markets, and celebrate our local food system in Rhode Island, and with immigrants taking station center. But at the same time, I also knew that we needed to do more things to improve these conditions. I was working for the URI Cooperative Extension System, and I knew we'd receive federal grants to do this work. And obviously through Farm Fresh Rhode Island, we also receive federal grants. So I was asking a lot of questions about who is enabling me to do this work? Who is actually funding this? What is the role of federal government and local government to make sure that I am not the exception, that I'm the norm? There's more and more people that look like me getting involved in food system. And that's when I attended my first lobby day here in DC. And I came with the Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Working Group. That some of you may be connected because they cover Maryland and Virginia as well. We actually had a meeting in Baltimore for that year when I came lobbying. And that's when I started really mapping to understand where I wanted to make the most impact, because I did believe in the role of government and the role of policy and the role of advocacy to improve our food system at the local and at the state level and across the country. Next. But before I did that, I got to do a few internships here in DC. And it was not the right timing because we had a non-supportive administration at the time. So I went to get my master's to Michigan State, where I focused on immigrant and refugee farmers in Michigan. And I wanted that because Rhode Island is really small for agriculture. We only have 1,000 farmers in the entire state of Rhode Island. So I wanted to go to Michigan, a place that has over 100,000 farmers, and 30% of those are immigrants, to really expand my horizon and understand better the struggles people like us, especially Latino and Hispanic farmers, were struggling. And that was a beautiful journey. I attend Michigan a lot. I really encourage everyone that if you are good at what you do and you're passionate, go learn where other people are doing it even better, so you can bring those skills back and you can fuel yourself in your journey. And a lot of things happen in Michigan, mostly that it really showed me what is to have a more diversified scene of advocates for food justice. Because in Rhode Island, I feel really lonely being one of the few people of color interested in this. But in Michigan, because of diversity of farmers and diversity of communities, we had a really thriving and diverse agricultural community of advocates, and also in the ground. So I'm really thankful for my time in Michigan, and also because at the same time they were leading the charge in a lot of the racial equity research on how do we push the food system forward. So I cannot stress enough, if you are interested in learning, go where they are doing great things and go learn there. Even when it pushes you out of your comfort zone. And I think for me, the most important thing that happened in this time is that I was welcomed to open arms. I moved to Michigan August 15. In August 16, I had job offers because people were just so excited that I moved to Michigan. So I really encourage you all to pursue some crazy dreams, like moving a few states away. My mom went to drop me off in Michigan, and she was so concerned about all the fields of corn and how lonely it was. But it was a great time there. Next slide. And all that led me to really grounding myself and being a policy specialist and programmatic person for immigrant refugees and young farmers in agriculture. Because I did my thesis on that, I had a programmatic experience in Rhode Island working with immigrants and refugees. That led me to get the job that I have today. It was my first job out of my master's, and I'm still here 4 years later. And it was a great place to grow, and that's with the National Young Farmers Coalition. I'm a board member with the National Sustainable Agricultural Coalition. We work really closely and tight together. So that has mostly led me to a lot of advocacy and engagement through Washington, D.C. and the country. For example, here I'm with my colleagues Mike and Sarah celebrating at the White House the Inflation Reduction Act that included unprecedented $30 billion for farmers. So we can see how I always tell people sometimes we want to do a lot of things in food, agriculture, climate, and the environment. And sometimes I tell people sometimes it's better to get good at one thing that you can become specialized and make the most impact of it. And especially through my journey, that has been BIPOC farmers, immigrant refugee farmers, and young farmers, because that part of the food system. And I'm going to show you more later about other parts of the food system. Continue. And that's where I am now. That's what a lot of the things that I'm doing in the food system today. But I heard a lot of notes in that journey. Next bullet. So I just want to remind you, it may seem easy, it may seem hard, but you're always gonna have and hear barriers in that journey. So especially for me in agriculture, I hear a lot of women don't care, even when we know that women are the fastest demographic of people becoming farmers. You know what I'm talking about. I have a master's degree in agriculture, and I still been told many times that I don't know what I'm talking about. And my favorite one, you're too young to be here. I just turned 28 years old, and I continue to be the youngest person in the room. And that's really concerning to me because there should be someone younger and that has completely different experiences than me also in that room. But I'm still considered a really emerging voice in our field. But it also tells you a lot about the dynamics on who gets to be in agriculture. The average farmer in America is white and is 59 and is male. And that's not how a lot of the emerging agricultural voices look like across the country, like me. Next. So, as I told you before, I have many identities and I struggled for a long time on what identities I wanted to claim. When I was in Rhode Island, I was the most Rhode Island person you can wish for. I love calamari, I love coffee milk, and I can tell you again where all the 45 farmers markets were in Rhode Island. And I really focused on being a good Rhode Islander. But when I was going through that, I really let go a lot of my Dominican identity because I didn't know how to be a Dominican American or a Dominican immigrant when I was surrounded and expected to be a certain thing. And then when I moved into Washington, D.C., and also to do a national advocacy, you're expected to be thinking nationally, not thinking localized. And it took me a long time to be comfortable next that it's okay. If the global food system is connected, I can also be connected. If I can also hold all these identities at the same time, because decisions that are happening in DC will affect the local food system in Rhode Island and will affect trade and exports imports agreements with the Dominican Republic. And that's just the nature of the global food system. Next slide. So if the global food system, if your food system can be global and interconnected and multifaceted and cosmopolitan, so can you. And I think I needed a lot of people to give me permission or to tell me that was okay to do because I felt like I couldn't be all those things at the same time. And it wasn't probably until the pandemic when we were like, geographic bounds don't matter anymore. We're all interconnected with technology, Zoom, and other tools that definitely pushed me and pushed others to be okay with this. So I'm definitely excited because this is how I feel right now. I go and spend 2 or 3 months in the Dominican Republic working in policy in Dominican grassroots farms there. I care about things happening in Rhode Island, in Michigan, and in Washington, D.C. And I still have to keep track of national, federal, and international legislation that affects young farmers and young people in agriculture. And I'm telling you, this is all okay to occupy all the spaces at the same time, because if your identity allows it and you claim that identity, you can also do it. Next slide. And you all this because the personal is political. It's really important for us to remember that as much as we want to be silo and we want to be cookie cutter and cluster, All our identities are intersectional, are interconnected, and all of this lead to our political um, placement and ideology, and also how we navigate as political beings in global food system, in American democracy, and beyond. Next. And now I want to share with you some of the tools that have helped me to get where I am, to get me comfortable doing all the things that I do, to do all the things I get to wake up to do every day, and all the things that I'm still learning to do. Next. I am not an influencer. You will never see me posting what I do an entire day in DC. People have asked me to do that, and that sounds exhausting to me. And I'm a young person. But it's really important that we find community in spaces that we are not seeing it. I needed to find people that were doing my work, that were had the same interests as me somewhere when in moments in my life where I felt like I was the only one doing those things. And for that place, for that purpose, social media can be a good place. So these are some of my favorite hashtags that I have used to find community, that I have used to find people that excite me, that keep me energized, or people that I look up to doing this work. So these are some of the ones I encourage you to use and to find, and also just to build your own community. For example, I was doing a racial equity challenge focused on food, and I started my own hashtag called Food Justice Friday that I did it for 5 years. Now I don't use it as much. But it allowed me to connect with a lot of people, to have a lot of conversation about the things that I was pushing in food systems, policy, and programmatic ways. Next. The best advice I can tell you, all of you, is share what you're feeling, share your stories in many different ways. Because the more that we assert that we belong, that we are perteneciendo to the food, agriculture, natural resource, environmental, climate movement, is by inserting our voices and our narratives into those discourses and conversations. And the way I did this was just by writing, blogging, guest blogging, doing op-eds about the things that made me angry, and just doing really long Instagram posts sometimes about food. And they may seem ubiquitous, they may seem nonsense, they may seem weird, but you never know who is reading what you're putting out. You never know what conversations your story, your narratives, and your ideas are generating to others. I still have people tell me 5, 7 years later about some of these blog posts that I posted that was the first time they felt seen and validated in food systems. And for me, some of those essays are still the most raw, honest essays that I have been able to share my story about how I feel about being a Dominican immigrant Afro-Latina woman in food systems in the United States. So whoever you are and all the identities you hold, I really encourage you to share them in many possible ways. Next. And if you're not comfortable writing, because I was not comfortable writing, and my writing is still not perfect, but I had people encourage me. You can always do storytelling, interviews, and panels, and many other formats for you to tell your story orally if you're more comfortable in that format. Next. And this is the one that I was not always comfortable because it's more trendy in social media. But I gotten really more comfortable with it because we can use it as a conversation, especially to have with other folks who might be interested in the work that you do, and just learning and sharing about the work that you really are doing. Next, then there's a picture missing there. Yeah. This was a podcast interview that I did about my thesis, and it was like the second week of my week in grad school, and I was like, what am I gonna say? But I think it was important. It doesn't matter where you are in your knowledge and your journey. It's important that we document and share our journey at different stages. Like if you have asked me to do a keynote 5 years ago, I will have been told you I just started grad school to learn about immigrants in the food system, and now I can tell you all the things I have learned in the past 5, 6 years. And obviously, I never did this because I wanted to engage with a specific population. I mostly did it as a discipline thing to tell myself I belong here. I need to be showing up. I need to be telling my story. I need to be inserting myself. I need to be saying I belong. I pertenezco to this movement. And that was an affirmation process for me. Many times we wake up and we tell ourselves nice things in the mirror every morning. Sometimes I had to do an Instagram post a day of me in Capitol Hill to remind myself that I belong here too. And that's what I do to my family every day that I have to go into the office. Next. This is my favorite one because I cannot stress enough how important it is that you don't do this alone. Lucky all of you, you're really part of Naturally Latinos Conference or Nature Forward or an organization already. You cannot do this by yourself. You need to be in community and supported by others because if you are just by yourself, I think it's too siloed, leads to a lot of protagonism. And I think that's not a narrative that we're trying to pursue when it's about caring about the earth or caring about a food system that's global interconnected. So for me, it has been really important to belong to organizations that not only give me a platform, but support me, train in me, and invest in me. So for me, it's really important for me to share some of the organizations that help me in my journey in many different ways. And I'm gonna give you some ideas. For example, the Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Working Group, NISA, they were the first one that sponsored me to come to DC and pay for me to attend a conference about food systems. And for me, it was a mostly BIPOC people of color conference. And that was a reminder that I was not by myself in Rhode Island doing all these things, but across my region, there were people that look like me who care about these things and that were pushing for our region and our country to be this way. Food Solutions New England, they do a Network Leadership Institute. If any of you are in New England and working in food and agriculture, they do a specific leadership training that focuses on just pushing emerging leaders to find their niche. And I can tell you the only reason I started writing a lot about my journey in food system is because I was taking the Food Solutions New England training. So it was like the training, the investment that they made that pushed me to be more outspoken about my journey and ideas for a more just food system. Rural Coalition is just a really special place formed of mostly grassroots organizations that I get to collaborate with. And now, as a professional, and before as an advocate, they will sponsor you to come to DC, and they will help you navigate a lot of policy and advocacy skills. Youth Climate is the official United Nations group for youth in climate advocacy inside the United Nations constituency. Inside that group, we have a specific group of youth in agriculture and food systems that I get to participate, and I get to submit direct feedback to the United Nations on supporting young people in agriculture. And what has been the most rewarding part about this, especially during the pandemic when so many of us were struggling with many things, is that I will talk to my counterparts in Africa, in Latin America, in Europe, and we were all struggling with many things related to policy, to program management, to interventions, to resources that we needed. So being interconnected beyond your geographical and non-political landscape has been a blessing for me to keep me energized and inspired by my international colleagues, especially when you're working on projects that take many years, many administrations, many policy changes. So keeping that energy going about what the future holds. The Rhode Island Food Policy Council, I want to stress the importance of really localized networks and opportunities. I was 20 years old, still in college, and my professor nominated me to be in the Rhode Island Food Policy Council. And I was like, I'm too young. Are you sure? And she was like, yeah. So we need sponsors, we need mentors, we need people in our lives that will push us to those leadership opportunities that we are told we are not ready for, that are not for us, and that we should not seek sometimes. We need those people to open the doors and tell you, you belong in this table, you belong in this room. And that's what the Rhode Island Food Policy Council did for me. It reminded me It was okay to be the most wildland loving food systems person. And still today, 5, 7 years after I left that position, I interact with them in a programmatic capacity, work partners and policy proposals, and I get to still be a wildland champion in my heart through supporting them. But you need to be allowed someone to get you into that room first, to be told that you deserve and that it's okay that you want to be there. And the most important thing someone once told me in the Rwanda Food Policy Council is you don't need permission to actually apply for some of these things or seek out these things. Many times in my journey, I've experienced a lot of gatekeeping and navigating these people in networks. Um, it's okay. It's okay. You don't need to ask permission. You can just go forward and hope for the best. Obviously, doing a respectful and dynamic way, but it's okay to be a little disruptive, to bring your leadership, your ideas, your vision about how an organization, a program, or your community should be run. Not just for food systems, for environmental, but for everything as a whole. um, National Social Agricultural Coalition. They are a powerhouse for policy, advocacy, and training. If any of your organizations is in food and agriculture and is interested in really getting their hands wet with policy advocacy in DC, they are the to go to. I get to serve on their board right now, and I just love the institutionality that they provide to many organizations and folks like me that really focus on policy and changing things in the long term. Because policy, we're not drafting policy for tomorrow. We're drafting policy to change and impact communities and farmers for 5, 10 years down the road. So they're a great institutional home based in Washington D.C. We actually have our flying in conference next week. And last, I want to tell you a little bit more about my current home, my work, and that's the National Young Farmers Coalition. We are a network of young farmers, mostly under 40, mostly BIPOC, mostly first generation farmers who are focusing on resourcing and acquiring land for the next generation to farm and feed our communities and to be environmental stewards. Something really unique about us is that as an organization, we focus on policy and grassroots advocacy, and that's working with members of Congress, USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and the White House to implement policy proposals and programmatic changes. They're equity driven that will serve the next generation and the current generation of farmers with racial equity and resourced or communities. All of this with a focus on farmers. They are environmental stewards and focus on environmental sustainability and fighting hunger and racial injustices in our communities. So if that sounds exciting to you, you can become a member because we have chapters nationwide, or you can become a general member. It's only $1, and we give you a lot of great discounts. But at the same most important thing, we give you a political home. We tell you and keep you updated in all the things that we're doing in DC. We train and support farmers and advocates to champion for land access, fair food prices, and many other things that farmers need to succeed and to keep our communities going. And that's a lot of the people and networks that I'm involved today. I'm probably missing a few. And I do many other things that I don't like to tell you, but let's move forward. And all of that is surrounded around my advocacy. If you were to tell me what I do, is I bother people. That's the best way. When my dad asked me what I do, I bother people. I remind them of the things that we need in our communities, that farmers need to succeed, and what are the best practices to fight climate change with agriculture. So all of that is advocacy, and sometimes you being in this role is an advocacy for who is coming up in the pipeline for agriculture, and that's young people like me, brown and black, immigrant from all over the country that want to change our food system for the better. Next. And all of us have many things that we care about. So now I want to invite you to do an exercise. Sorry, I forgot to tell you there will be a lot of homework on this presentation. So I want you to tell me to write down something that is important to you. I really care about young people in agriculture. I want to see more young people in agriculture, especially black and brown and immigrants and all over, representing agriculture. Then I want you to tell me why it's important. It is important that we keep a strong pipeline of young farmers and agricultural producers, because most farmers that are white and male are going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's 2 million people retiring. For me, it's important because I remember growing up in the Dominican Republic, and my dad is the only one of his brothers that decided to stay in agriculture out of 9 to 10 brothers. And out of his 6 children, I'm the only one that cares about agriculture. Doesn't mean I'm going to get a farm, but it means that I deeply care about my family's legacy in connection to land and to farming. Uh, and this all comes down to a value. So we need to name the value. Um, for example, it could be hard work, it could be environmental stewardship, or it could be something else. In this case, I'm gonna say young farmers are ready to work hard to keep our communities fed, our rural communities thriving, and most importantly, fight climate change. But, and this is where you talk about the issue, you need to tell me about what is the problem? Why is this not happening? Why cannot we do a step 1 to 4? Why we cannot have more young people access to green spaces? Why we don't have more Latinos working at the conservation service? Um, and there you talk about the issue. So I'm gonna give you 1 minute to try this. You don't have to write down all of it because it may be a little longer, but I really want you to flex out talking about the things that you care about and how you can become an advocate. If you were to run into an elected official tomorrow at a conference, what would you tell them to fight for? So I'm gonna give you a minute. Thank you everyone for sharing. Next slide. So you all told me about the issues that you care about, and I really want you to think about all the things that you do, all the things that you are. And example, this is for me the food system, especially in Rhode Island when I was getting started. And my advice for anyone is pick a corner and get good at it. Don't be a mile wide and an inch deep. Pick a part of the food system, the environmental movement that you're good at it, that you're passionate about, and focus on making the impact there. I have been lucky that I gotten to work all across the food system, but policy wise, I'm really good at production and harvesting. That's where I'm focusing my energy right now, and I invite you all to think about the landscape, the skills that you have, the environmental movement, the food system, and think about where you want to keep your energy at. Because only when we are the most specific and the most true advocates for the things that we want to change, and we come up with the best ideas and the best research in that focus areas that we have picked, that's our corner and we defend it, that's when we make the most change, in my opinion. Next slide. And that's what leads you to leadership opportunities. If I was a normal agricultural person that knew a lot about agriculture in general, I probably won't have access to the leadership opportunities and leadership of the food system that I have today. It's because I have built a trusted reputation of being good at this corner of the food system. So I invite you all to become specialists in the things that you're really good at already, because that's what leads to your leadership on those spaces, and it leads you to access to the people who are shaping those spaces. So that's leadership and that's advocacy. Next. And I just want to remind you to have fun, to have joy in this journey. I feel like I always remember to have fun. So that's why I go to the farmers market and I'm training to be a herbalist. And just go visit all the farms I can when job lets me. I get to be away from my computer. So just remember to be grounded on joy on this work, because this is hard work. And we need to remind ourselves that we're doing this for ourselves, for future generations, for communities, but also because it's work worth doing. Next. And I just want you to tell me no, it's okay, you can next. It's okay. I want you to tell me after this talk if there's something that sparked your interest. who do you want to become in food, agriculture, natural resources, or the environment? Is there a role that you want to explore? Is there a part of the food system, the environmental movement that you want to explore after this talk? Because remember, you have all those identities that we saw at the beginning, and all those identities belong, but there are many other things left for you to be and to become. So I invite you to become them and not be afraid of becoming an advocate in whatever you choose to put your energy on. Next. And that's just my context in case you want to stay in touch or if you want to share something that resonated with you. And now we're going to take questions. And I thank you again the opportunity to share my story, my journey, and my lessons with you all. And hopefully you can become the advocate that you wish to become. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Vanessa. You've been amazing. And thank you for sharing your journey with us at Natural Latinos Conference and sharing how all your identities have made you belong into this space and how you can make others also belong into this space as well with their identities. So thank you so much. Now we're going to take questions from the audience. So please start putting your questions in the chat and we will take as many as we can during our time. I did see one already. So let me see. Okay. Our first question is, do you feel conflicted of going from a practitioner to a policymaker? And if so, how do you remind yourself why you do what you do?
I do feel conflicted, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who are writing policy who haven't had half of the experience that I have. So you are qualified to be a policymaker, to be a policy leader based on your experiences. You just have to learn the lingo and learn a few different word strategies. But I do feel conflicted that I feel removed from the joy. Most of the joy comes from being on the ground and the excitement from implementing these programs. But now I get that joy intensified when I pass a veil and that veil is going to fund 20 projects. And it's not just the project that I was leading, but it's going to fund 20. So I think you just have to keep yourself reminded that we all inhabit different roles in our advocacy. And I forgot to add like the ecosystem of roles for social change. It's one of my favorite graphs. And I need to remember that I'm really good at enabling resources and passing policy so other people can lead those programs. So as long as you remember that you are one of the best people for the role, or that is your role in the ecosystem, you can find joy. And that's what reminds me and keeps me going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. So sort of like passing the baton to others, mm-hmm. And sort of having that long-term sustainability of mm-hmm. Projects definitely relate to as well. Our next question is, I guess this is back to also a little bit to the audience. If anybody knows of an organization that is facilitating mentors and mentees in the environmental field for BIPOC professionals. So I know you already gave some resources, but I don't know if you wanted to highlight back some of those or mention.
Yeah, I want to highlight one that I didn't mention. It's called Black Oak. That is actually based in the DMV, and that's a network of BIPOC professionals supporting other BIPOC professionals with jobs, mentoring, and just a lot of events all through the DMV region. I'm mostly focusing on like more like tech, government, policy related jobs related to the environmental field.
Yeah, I think in the chat I also saw that Choose Clean Water also has one, which is the young professionals of color as well. So I know they do. I was myself a YPC mentee a couple years ago, so I know they've done an excellent job, and it's a year, sort of like a year-long project. They pair you up with a mentor, and then you can also become a mentor yourself later. So it's great as well. Next question is, and of course, we're also getting a lot of beautiful comments of what a wonderful presentation and how they're also interacting or also identifying with their various identities as well. So thank you for that. Next question is, can you talk about whether you have counterparts or peers that collaborate within the surrounding New England states or beyond?
Yes, so technically I'm supposed to be national, DC based, but I'm biased towards New England, so I dip my toes in a lot of New England policy. But we do have two partners who are really critical in New England, and that's American Farmland Trust. They have a New England policy advocacy person, and that's mostly related to young farmland access issues. And we also have the Northeast Farmers of Color Network, NEFOC, and that mostly focuses on supporting farmers of color in New England.
Awesome. Not a specific question, but overall, in the chat, there's a lot of participants that are just interested in seeing if you could share any personal stories of being a mentor or being mentored yourself.
I think I'm gonna redirect the question a different way. I think a lot of people always ask me for informational interviews. And I want to tell you, you're happy to take an informational interview with me, but I don't like when I meet you once and you never reach out again, or like you just want to get a job at my org, which is fine. But I really want to focus on building relationships with people, because those will lead not only to mentorships, but they will open doors for you that you don't know about. For example, I invited an intern to a networking event for women in agriculture, and 2 years later, that intern is helping me write a bill with her senator. So I really want us to remember just to be opening doors and building relationships with folks, not always thinking as transactional mentor and mentorship, or things that are more subtle, because we support each other in many different ways that may be more informal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And have you learned of anything, I guess, from mentoring someone that has sort of impacted you as well?
I think we all passionate and interested in our work, but we all have imposter syndrome. I have imposter syndrome every day. My best friend has imposter syndrome. We all have it. And I think we just have to remember ourselves and reaffirm ourselves that we all have it. We don't know what we're doing. We're figuring it out as we go. And we need to do our best. We need to show up and do our best every day. I think that's the best advice I can give to any young professional.
Yep, that is true. And going back to your presentation of belonging, that we all belong in this space, and you have to sort of empower your identities, feel that you belong here, and don't let other people put you down, basically, because you do belong here.
Exactly.
So I want to say thank you so much, Vanessa García Polanco, for being our Day 2 keynote of Natural Latinos Conference 2024.